Have you ever imagined sitting on a plane, 30,000 feet above the ground, when suddenly everything goes silent? The captain's voice fades mid-sentence, the alarms start to scream, and every single passenger realizes something is terribly wrong. Now imagine that in the middle of that panic, one quiet passenger stands up. And when the crew hears her call sign, everyone, even the Air Force, stops in disbelief. This is one of those stories that reminds you courage has no uniform, and heroes sometimes travel like any of us, silent, unseen, until destiny calls. Welcome to Grow for Justice, where we tell stories of courage, truth, and humanity. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe because the story you're about to hear will stay with you long after it ends. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? It started like any other morning flight, Flight 714 from Chicago to Seattle. The sky was crystal clear, sunlight spilling through clouds like gold dust. Passengers were calm, reading newspapers, scrolling through phones, chatting softly. Everything felt peaceful. In seat 19, sat a woman named Laura Myers. She was quiet, early 40s, dressed in jeans and a faded jacket, her hair tied back. She didn't talk much, didn't smile much either. Just stared out the window, lost in thought. To most people, she looked like anyone else. But the truth about Laura was far from ordinary. She had spent 20 years flying something far more dangerous than passenger planes. She was once one of the most skilled Air Force pilots in the country, a name whispered with respect in squadrons across the world. Her call sign was Raven 7, known for pulling off impossible rescues in combat zones. But after a mission that went wrong and cost her wingman's life, she'd left the Air Force quietly, disappearing into civilian life, haunted by guilt. No one on Flight 714 knew that. To them, she was just another traveler. 1 hour into the flight, the comm broke. A jolt shook the cabin. A tray of coffee spilled across a flight attendant's arm. The seatbelt signs blinked. Then came the announcement, or rather, half of it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing minor static. Then silence. The co-pilot's voice came next, tense. If there's a doctor on board, please come forward immediately. A few passengers stood. Confusion spread. Then panic. A flight attendant whispered something to another and ran toward the cockpit. The captain, unconscious. Heart attack, they thought. The co-pilot was young, barely experienced enough for solo flight. And outside, a weather front was forming fast, dark clouds rising like walls of gray. Within minutes, the aircraft began to sway, turbulence turning rough. Passengers gasped, some prayed. A baby cried. The co-pilot tried to speak calmly over the intercom, but fear leaked into every word. Laura's eyes opened wide. She could tell from the sound of the engines. The pitch was off, the trim uneven. They were losing altitude. She unbuckled her seatbelt. "Ma'am, please sit down," a flight attendant said. Laura looked her dead in the eye. "If you want to land alive, take me to the cockpit." The attendant hesitated, unsure whether to believe her. But the authority in Laura's voice wasn't something you argued with. Seconds later, she was at the door. The co-pilot looked up, pale, panicked. "I'm Laura Myers," she said. "Former Air Force. Call sign Raven 7. Let me help." His eyes widened. He had heard that name before. Everyone had. "You're the Raven 7? She nodded once. "Let's get this bird steady." Laura slipped into the captain's seat, hands moving over the controls like she had never left. The feel of the yoke, the pressure of the rudder pedals, it all came flooding back. She took a deep breath. "Altitude 29,000, airspeed 310, the co-pilot said, voice shaking. "Not for long," Laura replied. "We're climbing too hard into that storm. Pull back power 10%. Outside, lightning flashed. The cabin lights flickered. But inside the cockpit, her calm began to replace chaos. The co-pilot followed every command she gave, watching as she trimmed the plane, corrected drift, and stabilized the nose. "Raven 7 to control," she said into the radio. The air traffic controller paused. "Did you say Raven 7? This is Flight 714. Captain down. I'm taking command." There was silence on the frequency. Then, copy that, Raven 7. We have you on radar." "It's an honor, ma'am." We're clearing a path for you." Word spread fast. In the cabin, the flight attendants whispered to passengers that a military pilot was now flying the plane. Gasps turned to hope. The passengers didn't know her name, but they could feel it. The energy had shifted. Panic turned into quiet faith. Storm front dead ahead. The co-pilot warned that Laura's voice stayed steady. "We can't go over it. We'll ride under the ceiling and cut through the corridor. Buckle in tight." Rain hammered the windshield. Thunder cracked so loud it rattled the walls. The plane shuddered as gusts slammed against its sides. Oxygen masks dropped, screams filled the air. But through it all, Laura's hands never wavered. Every correction, every throttle adjustment, perfect in that cockpit. She wasn't the broken ex-pilot anymore. She was Raven, 7 again. And the sky remembered her. Minutes felt like hours. Then finally, the storm broke. Sunlight spilled back across the clouds like a curtain opening after chaos. The passengers erupted in applause, unaware that the danger wasn't over yet. They were still hundreds of miles from the nearest airport, flying on limited autopilot. Fuel's dropping faster than expected, the co-pilot said. "We can't reach Seattle." Laura nodded. "Then we'll make our own way." She coordinated with air traffic control to divert to a small base outside Idaho, an old Air Force strip she knew by heart. When the controller asked how she remembered it, she smiled faintly. "Because I helped map it 15 years ago." As the runway came into view, tension filled every nerve in her body. It had been years since she landed a plane, and never one this big. She whispered to herself, "Come on, Raven, one last flight." She lowered the gear, flaps down, adjusted pitch. The engines roared. The runway grew larger, faster. Speed 160, 150, 140, the co-pilot called. Laura pulled gently, the wheels screeching as they touched ground. The cabin jolted, then steadied. The aircraft rolled, slowed, and finally came to a stop. Silence. Then applause. Then tears. When she stepped out of the cockpit, the passengers stood, clapping, crying, calling her a hero. But she only smiled faintly and said, "The real hero was the captain. I just finished his flight." Hours later, as paramedics took the captain to the hospital, Laura stood by the plane, the evening wind brushing against her jacket. 2 F-22s flew low overhead, a silent salute from the Air Force. The radio buzzed one last time. "Raven 7, said a familiar voice from control. "The skies remember you, ma'am. Welcome home." She didn't answer, just looked up, eyes glistening as the jets vanished into the clouds. That night, passengers posted their stories online. Videos of her stepping out of the cockpit went viral. Millions watched, millions criés. But Laura didn't seek fame. She disappeared quietly again, back to her small apartment near the lake, where she lived peacefully. Finally at ease with the ghosts she once carried as, "Oh, next time you fly," and turbulence hits, and you clutch your seat thinking the sky is merciless. Remember this story. Somewhere among you might be a Raven 7, someone who doesn't talk much, doesn't boast, but carries the kind of courage that saves lives. Because heroes don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they just rise when the world needs them most. And that's the story, friends. If this gave you chills, if it reminded you what real bravery looks like, then make sure you subscribe to Grow for Justice, where real courage meets unforgettable storytelling. And before you go, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We'd love to know where stories like this are finding hearts like yours.